Hi, I am Bill Hodges, and this is Spotlight on Government. And today, we've got a great guest who happens to be a Hall of Famer from the University of Tampa. She's the mother of two, but more importantly, she's the Assistant Chief of the Tampa Police Department. Chief Jane Castor. Jane, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You know, you have been with the police department for quite a number of years now. How many years was that?
25, just went past 25.
You really don't look like you've been here that long.
Thank you, I appreciate
You're
that.
One of those people that stays looking young. It's obviously been good for you and to you. Mm-hmm. Would you recommend this as a career path for the young ladies out there and the young gentlemen? Because you actually have everybody reporting to you that's in uniform, correct?
That's correct. Yes, I enjoy it. There's never been a day that I haven't enjoyed law enforcement, but it's certainly not for everyone. And public service obviously is very admirable in any aspect of society. But one of the things when I instruct at colleges, one of the things that I suggest is that the Tampa Police Department has a very liberal ride-along program. So I suggest that all the young people come and ride along. Have to fill out 2 pages of forms. We do a quick background. Obviously, we're open 24/7, and they can ride anywhere, any place, anytime. Undercover narcotics squad, street-level narcotics.
Really? Can some of us old people do that too?
Sure, old people can do it too.
Sounds like it might be an interesting thing to do. Let's drop back. You were at the University of Tampa. You played basketball and volleyball, if I understand. And you're a Hall of Famer there. I think the story you told me about your youngsters, your 2 children, talking to you about basketball. Why don't you share that with the audience?
Well, both of my boys are not soon to be 10 years old, and I take them to University of Tampa soccer and basketball camp every summer. And so this year I went to pick my boys up from the basketball camp, and they grabbed my hand. They said, Mom, come here quick, close your eyes. We have to show you something. So they took me out into the lobby of the gym. They said, okay, open your eyes. And they both pointed. They said, look, it's you, it's you. And I said, yeah, I know. I said, you know, I was inducted into the Hall of Fame. So one of my boys, Sealy, says, well, Mom, what's the number on that basketball you're holding? And I said, well, that's 1,000 points. I scored 1,000 points during my career, you know, all proud. And he immediately, without hesitation, says, ooh, Mama, you didn't pass the ball.
Mama's the ball hog.
Yeah, basically is what he told me. So.
Well, you know, going from there, then you decided when you finished college to go on into law enforcement. What drove you to that? Was that something you really wanted to do? Was it a dream, or was it just something that caused you to go that way?
Well, my degree was in criminology, but I had aspirations of going into the federal service, into FBI, Secret Service. But at the time, Ronald Reagan was the president, and he had put a freeze on federal hiring. So some of the friends of mine that I had gone through college with had become Tampa police officers. So they encouraged me to come down and apply to the Tampa Police Department. So while I would like to say that it was a lifelong dream to work at the Tampa Police Department, I, in essence, kind of stumbled into it. But as I said, there hasn't been a day in 25 years that I haven't enjoyed what I've done.
But you grew up here, right? You are a Tampa person? You were born in Tampa?
Born and raised in Tampa.
There aren't that many of them.
Yeah, there aren't that many. There's 5 kids in my family, so there's still 5 Castor kids here.
Tell me, if someone were thinking about going into law enforcement today, and they're going to go into college now or get out of high school, or even before they got out of high school, what would be the career path? What would they have to take?
Well, that's the beauty of law enforcement, is that as we spoke earlier, you know, it takes a certain kind of a person. You have to have kind of an innate sense of curiosity and pretty much be a little nosy and a little forceful personality. But in law enforcement, every talent is valuable. You know, if you're working in an undercover capacity, then obviously a flair for acting or those types of things is very important. Yeah. I don't know if that's on the checklist, but that would be a good one as well. But, you know, you can just do so many things in law enforcement. And I think that's what makes it very appealing to the young adults, is that, especially with the Tampa Police Department, is a very popular organization. We have little difficulty filling our vacancies, and it's because we have such a variety. We have mounted patrol, we have bike units, we have motorcycles, undercover street-level narcotics, specialty squads, air service if you have your pilot's license. So there's just a variety of things that you could work in. One of the things that I tell young kids, and this really is kind of overarching into life itself, is be mindful of the decisions that you make when you're young, because if you make decisions that end up in an arrest or criminal charges or using drugs, those types of things, they can come back to haunt you as an adult when you try to
big time,
right,
yeah.
To get into any field, not just law enforcement.
That is important, because you see these kids, and I was one once, but it was a long time ago, and I'm having trouble thinking back that far, the stupid things I did. Right. But I watched some of them do these really stupid things, and I recognize, first of all, they're kids. Right. And kids do stupid things. Yeah. But some of them are like breaking out 16 windows of cars down the street. That's just vandalism. Right. And quite often it's not a joke. It's not funny.
That's right. Quite often it's peer pressure. And most kids, when you talk to them after you've arrested them, most kids have a pretty good sense of right and wrong, and they knew what they were doing was wrong. But there's a lot to be said for peer pressure, and I think that's what's important for parents to encourage their children to be independent and to stick to those values of what's right and wrong.
Now, if you're going to come in and be a patrol officer, that's what you want to apply for. Do you have to have some college to do that now?
Yes, in our department you have to have 60 hours of college education. Now, when Chief Hogue came in, what he did was allow for military experience. If you have military experience, that can be exchanged. That can be exchanged for the 60 hours of college. However, to be promoted, for each of the positions throughout the department, you have to have more and more college.
So if you don't want to just be a patrolman your entire life, you want to be a corporal or sergeant or whatever as you move up, you've got to go back and get that night school.
That's true. And we also have educational incentives. The city of Tampa will pay for a certain number of college hours. So it makes it a little bit easier. It's difficult to work full-time and go to school, but if you have future aspirations, then that's the sacrifice you're going to have to make.
Besides your current assignment as assistant chief, where you get to put your finger in lots of different pots, what was the most interesting of the various jobs you've held in the police department?
Oh, that's hard to nail down. I would say that I worked as a supervisor in narcotics, the mid-level echelon, and that was very interesting. Obviously you didn't have to feel sorry for anyone because everyone put themselves in that position. So that was very, very interesting. That's where you learn how to be a supervisor. I ran the intelligence unit for 7 years, and we did a variety of things, looking at extremist groups, looking at extremist groups, dignitary protection, the motorcades for the president, vice president.
My goodness.
And then all the way down to adult entertainment was another one of our roles in that
And we have a lot of that here in Tampa.
We have an overabundance of that. One of the toughest assignments, I would say, in my career was the supervisor of the sex crimes and child abuse unit. That was
that'd be hard to go to bed at night.
Yeah, very, very, very difficult assignment.
What do you see for the Tampa Police Department? Where is it going?
Well, the Tampa Police Department, we have a very, very well-respected department. One of the reasons that the Tampa Police Department is so successful is that we have the complete backing of the mayor and of the city staff and city council. And we have just an outstanding department. I've told you earlier that we don't have an issue recruiting officers, and most often the last 2 classes of officers that we've hired, that we have sworn in, all but one had previous experience. So they'll go to another agency and then come to our department to work. And we have been very, very successful in our crime reduction. Chief Hogue has been in office now. He's been the chief of police for almost 6 years. And we've had a dramatic reduction in crime during that time.
Yeah, we're hopeful to have the chief on the show here in the next couple months. I really look forward to talking with him too.
He's a great guy.
Well, in my mind, being a good supervisor is finding people that work for you to do the things that need to be done. And obviously he's good at that.
There you go. Yeah, that's what he'll try to say, but he'll give the credit elsewhere, but it's certainly been what he has done and the plan that he has laid out for the Tampa Police Department. And then, as everyone knows, anybody that's gone through organizational change, it's not enough to have a good plan. You have to successfully implement that, and he's done that. He's been very successful at that.
I believe there's a line out of the Bible that says, where there is no leadership, the people will perish. And it's the same way with any organization. I teach stress management, I teach supervisory skills to companies all over the country. And one of the most important things is having a supervisor that knows when to delegate and when to check up and when to get out of the way.
Exactly.
And obviously, he's picked some good people and he's getting out of the way and letting them do the jobs that he asked them to do.
Well, I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you. But obviously it's his direction and his plan that he's set forward. So,
since we just had the Super Bowl here and then followed that up with the 1-2 punch with Castor, let's talk a little bit about the Super Bowl. What did it do to us as far as
the police department or the city?
Right. Well, the influx of people coming into the city. Did you see a bounce in crime during that period of time?
Actually, I would say, we've been planning for it for over 2 years, having regularly scheduled meetings. And the public really has no idea what goes into putting a Super Bowl on.
Well, we need to hear that.
Okay. Well, we were told that this was one of the most, if not the most successful Super Bowl. As I told you earlier, we did it on basically a shoestring budget. Obviously, in these economic times, we were in a much better position when we were granted the Super Bowl than when it actually occurred. We, as far as law enforcement, were able to put on that Super Bowl for approximately 15% to 18% of what the 2 previous Super Bowls cost in Miami and Phoenix.
Why is that?
Well, one of the reasons is we are an urban area security initiative location, a UASI, which is a program the Department of Homeland Security puts on. We've been involved in that since 2003, and we've put a lot of programs and processes in place to help us with everyday security as far as it concerns Homeland Security and terrorism, but also crime reduction. So there were a lot of things that we already had in place that we didn't have to buy. Also by virtue of being a location, and I hate to say that this is an anomaly, but in the city of Tampa, all law enforcement gets along and works very, very well together. And I really haven't ever seen in my travels throughout the United States seen as cohesive a network in law enforcement as there is in the city of Tampa.
And we're talking about the city
feds,
of Tampa,
the state,
the feds,
right.
All of it, really.
Hillsborough County, the city of Tampa.
I knew the sheriff's department tended to work well, even under Cal Henderson. The seeds were sown, and certainly David G. is good at that.
Right. We all work very, very well together. And the things that the public didn't see, I'll tell you, for example, just the credentialing. We gave out 23,000 credentials to the individuals who are putting on the Super Bowl. That includes the vendors, law enforcement, and had to go through background checks for every one of those individuals.
Oh, my.
It's just, the magnitude of it is amazing. For example, there were over 200 Super Bowl-related activities outside of the venue. All of those weren't sanctioned, but over 200 events in the city of Tampa, Hillsborough County, and Pinellas County that obviously we had to monitor. So there's a lot going on, but I think that the success is, first and foremost, is that there weren't any large-scale events. We had about a dozen arrests, and most of those were counterfeit tickets and then people trying to jump the fence thinking that they were going to get into the Super Bowl. But, that nobody that attended the Super Bowl or watched it saw that security. So it was everywhere, but it was really nowhere. They didn't, it wasn't disruptive at all. The Super Bowl went off seamlessly, and you didn't notice that, we had snipers up in certain areas. That we had, for example, one helicopter came into the no-flight zone, and they had to dispatch F-16s to escort it back to Sarasota. Those are things that the public never noticed.
No, I didn't see that.
Right, nobody saw that. But we had in the Joint Operations Command, which was an off-site location, we had over 100 federal, state, and local emergency operations officials, including law enforcement, fire, emergency management, that were running that Super Bowl. Wow. Broken down into different segments, marine, aviation. I mean, it was just amazing, and it was a very, very efficient operation, very efficient. And they're going to use that, in essence, as an overlay for future Super Bowls. And we had individuals from the future Super Bowls come and you know, shadow us throughout this experience. But to get back and answer your question about the crime in Tampa, although we had an estimated 1 million visitors to the city, our crime actually went down for the month of January 9%.
Really?
So obviously there was no disruption or interruption of the service to the citizens throughout Tampa.
Yeah, it's, you know, when you see that big a group of people coming in town, many of them very wealthy, wearing those big rings and all the blitz and what do they call it? Blings, all that wonderful stuff. You know, you think, whoa, you know, this is really an invitation for a lot of crime. Hotel room burglaries, things like that. But if crime went down 9%, maybe we ought to have a Super Bowl every other month or two.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Well, we had a lot of you know, other officers, but we do, just by virtue of our mission is crime reduction, and it has been for the last 6 years. And so we did a lot of prevention. We had a lot of security at the hotels, had information for the visitors, you know, all of those things. We had things that spiked, like, for example, in the district where the Super Bowl was, we had 11 pickpockets, where the previous year we had 0. It's not a big crime unless you're trying to get somebody's Super Bowl tickets. So.
Yeah, you were talking about crime reduction, and I think that's a very important thing. We always think of the police as an afterthought. After the crime, now the police step in. But let's talk a little bit about crime reduction. What would you tell the folks that they could do to help reduce crime and help you in your job?
Right. Well, there are a number of things. Obviously, just personal awareness. For example, if you're going to shopping malls, any public venue, just to be aware of your surroundings. And if something seems unusual or out of the ordinary, then it probably is. You need to trust your instincts. One of the crimes that you know, that we try to tackle on a regular basis are auto burglaries. There's a large number of auto burglaries, and we've brought those down over the 6 years. We've brought those down almost 50%. But that is a 100% preventable crime. If you don't we've never arrested a car burglar that was not going into that car for a particular item. So if you've left your computer, your purse, your iPod, or your cell phone within plain view, they're going to break out a window and take that and be gone. So that's completely preventable.
Yeah, you know, people do that all the time, the smash and grabs. They leave stuff out, and that goes for the same thing, I know, in certain houses. You walk up to the door, and they've got a big glass window in the door, and you can see things sitting there, a purse or whatever. Oh, the lady leaves her purse there because she uses it when she goes out. It's neat. But that's not a good thing to do.
No, not at all. You know, it is part of the way that the Tampa Police Department looks at it is that we are going to reduce crime. We are going to be a partner with the community, but it's the community that knows who belongs in their neighborhood, you know, what's suspicious and what isn't. And then they should work with us to bring that crime down. But really the onus is on the citizens of Tampa. We're here to do what we can to help the citizens.
Yeah. I think most people are basically trusting.
Yes.
I mean, as much as we tell them, be careful, be careful, be careful, somebody comes to the door. And this just happened in Sun City Center. A friend was telling us last night, this woman came to their door, and she had a box of candy in one hand, and she had a beautiful teddy bear in the other. And she said, I would like to give you a free estimate on cleaning your carpets, and for letting me do that, you have the choice of either the box of candy or the teddy bear. And this person said, I'm not letting her in my house. But somebody else did. Right. And this woman, while she was there, she's talking, very personable, told the other people that she needed to use the restroom. Could she? She went in the bathroom, and when she left, about an hour later, they went in and looked, and this woman had cleaned out all their pills.
Oh.
Every pill they had was gone.
Wow.
And evidently it's a scam where somebody drops off a half a dozen people. You know, would you trade a teddy bear for a big box of OxyContin?
Yeah.
Sure, street value is pretty, you being an ex-narcotics officer.
Right, yeah.
But these are scams. You just don't let people in your house if you don't know them, right?
Exactly. That is the truth. And the vast majority of them you hit it right on the head. They're just too trusting. And we as human beings just don't trust our instincts. If something says that this isn't right, it's too good to be true, then that's usually the case.
If it's too good to be true, it is.
Yeah,
Somebody
exactly.
once said you can't cheat an honest man. And if you're looking like you maybe can take advantage of somebody else, it's probably not a good deal. We've had a lot of these scams going out there. In fact, I had Kevin Jackson from the county on last week, or this last month, talking about the various kinds of scams.
Right.
And we went through, I think I had a whole thing of different posters that they pass out or handouts, and each one was a different kind of scam.
Right.
You know, telephone, knock on the door, all this contractors.
Yeah.
There's a morass of those people out there.
There certainly are.
Every time we can stop one, we let you go work on something else.
There you go. That sounds good.
Now, what kind of crime reduction have we had?
Well, what we did is we put a new deployment in place when Chief Hogue came in. Obviously, when Mayor Iorio came into office, our crime rate was pretty high, way too high. So what she instructed Chief Hogue to do was to bring down the crime rate. Thus, our mission is very simple. Everyone can understand. Our mission is to reduce crime and improve the quality of life through a cooperative partnership with the community. Very simple. So there were a lot of ancillary functions that we didn't do, as I like to say, a lot of the dog and pony shows that we just don't do anymore. We are 100% dedicated to bringing down the crime rate. And as a result of this redeployment, we put all of our resources that in the past had been specialized, we put them all out into the districts. So each of the district majors has their own police department, and they can deploy those resources in whatever manner they see fit to bring down the crime rate. And we have, in the past 5 years, almost 6, have brought down the crime rate 46% in the city of Tampa. And I would venture to say that that's unsurpassed in the country. And it has, and we have been, our numbers, our stats have been audited 3 or 4 times now. And in one audit, we had one mistake, and it was a mistake that of a title, not necessarily the crime wasn't in the right category, part 1. But we have had, for example, in our auto theft, we've had a 69% reduction in auto theft.
Wow, that's great.
That
helps
is
with
great.
all our insurance rates.
And one of the ways that we were able to achieve that was the juveniles. The young juveniles, we have started what we call worst of the worst list with juveniles. Those kids that if they're out, you know, they're just veritable walking crime waves. And so the juvenile...
Probably not funny, but it just sounds
true.
that way.
The juvenile probation officers, you know, they don't have the time. Their caseloads are huge. So we have assigned our officers to go and check on these kids every day, because part of their sanctions, which is a juvenile probation, is that they have a curfew and that they attend school. So we have our school resource officers have a list of all of these kids, make sure they show up to school. If they don't, they call the zone officer and we go out on the hunt. We make sure they're at home when they're supposed to be at home. If they're not, then they're arrested for a violation of those sanctions. And you wouldn't believe it unless you saw it, but we can have 2 or 3 of these worst of the worst juveniles sent off to a 3, 4, 5-month program, and the crime rate, property crime rate in that area will plummet.
Wow.
So it's just
you know that they're responsible for it, or at least an instigator in it.
Right, because there really hasn't been any punishment in the past. You know, they would steal cars, then they wouldn't show up to court. The victim would. The juvenile wouldn't. Nothing would happen. They'd be put right back on the same sanctions. So this would happen over and over until the victim would give up. You know, they can only miss work so much. So then the charges are dropped. So now they don't. We've worked with a court system. They don't show up to court. We go out and get them and bring them to court to make sure that they're going to be punished for their actions. And the court systems work very well with us. We're working now to actually develop a worst of the worst juvenile court, so that, you know, these kids will start to receive some punishment for what they've done, and that'll be an example for some of the younger kids coming up.
You know, one of the things that has always bothered me about our penal system is that in our zeal to punish people, we just actually warehouse them and cause them to be worse before they're done. With these worst of the worst kids, is there any effort being put into helping them or changing them or bringing them around? Well,
I tell you what, that goes back to a funding issue, so that's difficult. But the kids that I'm talking about, and I don't want this to sound too harsh, but they've almost passed that point. You know, these are kids that have committed hundreds of felonies. But what we do have is we have grant funding in place to do assessment testing on siblings in those families and then other kids who come through the Juvenile Assessment Center to see what kind of services they need to try to redirect them and get them away from a life of crime. So I'm not talking about, you know, there's a very small percentage of these kids that cause the vast majority. You have the 80-20 rule, which applies to adults and juveniles. You've got 20% that are committing 80% of the population, or the 80% of the crime.
Pareto's 80-20 rule. It works.
Right. It kind of works for everything, doesn't it?
All the way back to the Greeks when Pareto came up with that. You know, it's true. There is an 80-20 on everything. And I suppose I'm a little more sensitive because I lived in an area that was very, very bad as a kid. And I have several of my friends who, one died of a drug overdose, one of them was shot in a robbery, and another one's doing time in Jackson Prison, will never get out. I thank God that it wasn't me. Right. Because I had some people reach down and help me and get me to where I could keep going. I had parents that loved me and cared about me, so it was important. So I really, I'm glad we've identified them, but I really hope that somebody out there will say, okay, all right, if we can identify them, maybe we can change them around.
And I think that's something that the community can do, the mentoring. You know, you can help a child. I've mentored my little sister since she was 8, and she'll soon be 14 years old, going on about 35 or 36. But you can make a difference in a child's life, and some kids just don't have that opportunity that we have.
On that, we're going to have to close. Chief Jane Castor, thank you so much for being with us on the program. It's been great to have you, and I hope you'll come back.
Great.
Because you're in charge of Homeland Security too, correct?
Yes, sir.
So we need to talk about that one of these days. I know everybody's interested in how secure we are and the threats.
Great.
I'm Bill Hodges. You're unique, you're special, and you're great. Tell yourself all often, because you are. You know, we'll see you on the next Spotlight on Government. Thank you. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
And at this point, he should be clear.
How you doing? I just want regular, no sugar today.
You got it.
Thanks. Hello.
Hi.
Did you eat that whole thing today?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, how you doing?
She's getting big, huh?
Good. Yeah, she is big. Great haircut.
Yeah.
Yeah, looks cute. Well, let's go. Nice to see you. Thanks a lot.
If only child abuse were this easy to recognize. If you even suspect abuse, call 1-800-4-A-CHILD. All calls are anonymous and confidential. Trust your instincts.
Hi, how are you doing today?
What looks good?
Our special today is shrimp scampi. It's been sitting around for about a week.
Excuse me. What time are you guys leaving? We're gonna rob your house tonight.
Don't you wish there were warnings to protect you from life's risks? With diabetes, there is one. It's called A1C, a simple blood test that helps measure your risk of a heart attack and other complications. Learn more at diabetesaonc.org.